It's good to be with you today, both of you. I've known you for such a long time, and you feel like family. And I have grown over the years to trust you. Glen, I remember when you were just a kid, when you're 19 years old and you're working in the CCO newsroom, and we loved having you, but then your dad had a heart attack and you had to leave, and then because of the trouble there in the business and the family, he had to quit television, and we miss you. But that's my memory of part of hundreds of memories of actually working with you at these galas. But thank you very much for allowing me to sit here and let other people know more about you.
Well, Don, it's fitting that you are doing this interview today because we have known you for most of my adult life. And I was 19 years old working at WCCO. My heart was journalism. I wanted to be in TV news. But we grew up, Kristine and I grew up on a farm in Kandiyohi County. Our dad started this auction business in 1978, selling farmland. And September of 2001, I'm in the newsroom. I get this call of Kristine that our dad has this heart attack and he's being flown from the Wilmer Hospital to St. Cloud. I leave the newsroom, have no idea if I'm gonna meet her and if he's gonna be alive or dead. And fortunately he survived, but it was like at a point where the business would collapse. And the truth of it is, I think, we had a heart for our auction business. We had a heart for selling farmland, but when you're kind of forced into it at a young age, it wasn't really a choice. It was an emergency situation. I think looking back on it now for you and I, it was a blessing. It was maybe God's calling for both of us. Our heart was there. But now it's led us to today.
And I think it was always on Glen and I's heart to maybe someday go in the auction business. And we really had a heart for farmland, having grown up on the farm. But I don't think we would have ever thought that young, overnight, we'd step into the family business. But like Glen said, I think the dear Lord sometimes works in mysterious ways, and we're so thankful that Mom and Dad are still with us today. But we jumped in with 2 feet and really have a heart to serve, and we haven't looked back. And so we consider it actually a blessing.
And getting to your question about our heart, I think there was a blessing for Kristine and I, which was, we grew up on a farm. There wasn't a lot of money for, growing up from 0 to 15. Our parents were making these land payments, but we grew up watching these family transactions of selling a farm and the difficulty, how to finance it, how to buy it. And I think it really made us, it was what we needed to be successful, which is, it was never lost on us that this is a big deal for people, and it's a lot of money, or there's one farm to sell in your lifetime.
And gives you an understanding of the dilemma that a lot of people face when the family farm, for whatever reason, and I know you have lots of reasons that you have seen that people are, I don't want to say forced into, but are forced to make a decision about whether to sell the family farm. Perhaps the one they grew up on, or perhaps the one their great-grandparents owned.
So our business today, Fladeboe Land, we sell farmland across Minnesota. Our bread and butter is southwest and west central and western Minnesota, but across the entire state. About 70% of the farms that we sell go to public auction. But getting to the heart of your question, almost every day we get a call from some family, whether it's in Edina or Renville County or Swift County, and says, Glen and Kristine, our mom just passed away. She was 92. We have no idea what our farm is worth. We have no idea what we should do. And really what we're doing is consulting with those families to come up with the right plan. If it is going to be sold, what is the right plan?
And so for some of these families, selling the family farm will be life-changing for them. They will send kids or grandkids to college, or they will pay off mortgages, or maybe they'll buy a cabin and make more memories of a family, or sometimes they will give money to a nonprofit, and thereby that will bring them a ton of joy.
The thing that I would like to talk to you about now is the reality of younger people who have either decided to become farmers or they are the descendants of the original owners, but may not be completely qualified to take on the hard work of running a farm, of doing everything, all of the loans that they have to take out for the seeds and the fertilizers and what the markets are at a certain time. They may not be skilled or gifted in this area. How do you deal with younger people wishing to do that, especially when there's such competition between corporate farms and the direct sales where you don't know that it's going to be an absentee owner and it'll all be rented out to someone? How do you deal with younger people coming into farming?
We've worked hard at that, and we've done a lot recently to help the younger farmers. And about a third of our business, the land doesn't go to auction. We're hired to privately negotiate the sale to the neighbor kid, the tenant, the cousin, the nephew, etc. And there's ways for a family to both get a fair price and create an opportunity for a younger farmer.
But as Glen just said, about 30% of our work is private sale negotiations. Don, we'll get a call from a family and they'll say, Kristine, Glen, you can't even talk me into an auction, but I'm considering selling our farm to our tenant, our nephew, our cousin, our neighbor, and we would like your help as a third party to price that farm, help us with the value of that farm, which we've talked about is highly consequential and so important. And something that we are really excited about and we find to be very meaningful work is helping with the negotiations as a third party. Don, if you can imagine, it's very awkward often to do that negotiating with that loved one or neighbor or tenant. And so Glen and I handle that with white gloves.
You know, I was just thinking, because I've watched your work and I understand what's going on with the family farm economy and corporate farming and things like that, but what you've broken down for me is this idea that you really have to wear many, many hats. And I think one of the biggest hats you all have to wear is kind of a grief counselor. You have to do family therapy, real estate, assessment values. You've got so many balls in the air, but you have to, when you're working with individual families, you have to be a kind, listening voice.
And so when they call us, whether it results in business or not, we simply want to be there to listen, to hold their hand, to wear all the hats that you speak of. And for most of the families, not all, but the majority, Don, it is a highly emotional process for them. And we really honor that, and it's meaningful work for Glen and I, having grown up on the family farm and listening to stories of both of our parents grew up on dairy farms and our grandparents, and we understand that when it comes time for them to consider to possibly turn the page or keep the farm, it's very emotional for families. And so I think something that gets Glen and I out of bed in the morning is knowing how can we make a difference in the lives of others today? It might not result in an auction or a private sale, but how can we come alongside of a family and serve them well and help them make an informed decision?
Just remarkable, the two of you, that as a business model where everybody in the world seems to be out to make money for more money and more money and more things and more things, the humility of the Fladeboe family is striking to me. It's always been, since I knew Glen at 19 years of age. I don't hear any hard sell in your process. I don't hear you saying, yeah, I can get you this amount of money for your farm, and yeah, don't worry about it because things change and we just have to move on in our lives.
Well, Thank you for those kind words. We've been blessed. I mean, we were born with really good parents. We were born with a great work ethic. You know, we were born in Vinci Church that every Sunday in Welmer, and you know, parents that work super hard to send us to college and do the right thing. I mean, we've been blessed. But I think we've also learned, if you do a really good job and you're honest, you're also blessed in business. I mean, we are very, very busy because I think we've just tell people the truth, give them the best recommendations for their family, and walk with them even if it doesn't result in a paycheck. Because if you do that, you will become pretty busy in this line of work and people will respect it, I think.
Our parents have always said something, Don, and our dad, still in his early 80s, and Mom to this day say this. He'll say, Glen and Kristine, the day you take this business lightly, get out of the business. The day you take it lightly, get out of the business.
And I'll just say one additional thing. 2 months ago, we get a phone call from a brother and sister that own a farm in Swift County. They both are fighting cancer. They are both fighting cancer. The farm is worth roughly $800,000. And we're on this Zoom meeting with them. And this is a big deal, a huge deal for them, you know, how to get through this moment of cancer and how do they fund things. And you know, I think that has really also been the grounding of the advice that we have to give, that we need to sell this farm. We need to get them a really good price, an honorable price, but we need to do it in a way that also walks their journey during this time. And so, you know, when you do that week after week, year after year, it affects your soul. And all of a sudden, you don't look at this as just, oh, my job is to sell this farm. My job is to help this couple, the brother or sister, walk through this.
Price is the thing that it seems fungible, because the price of land, what we think our farm is worth, may not be what it's worth. We may overprice it, we may underprice it, we may look at the tax assessor's bill and say this is the fair market value. But the tax assessor is not really paying attention to the market per se. So what happens if a person says, I've got a couple of sections, I think I could probably, I've been offered by a friend or by a business person in town to give me $600,000 for it. And you do what? How do you know that $600,000 is not just a good price? It may be a terrible price. It may be worth $2 million. How do you get that across? How do you do the research?
Number one, the single greatest mistake a family can make when they're about to sell a farm is to not consult with a professional. Whether that's they can consult with us or they consult with a land appraiser or somebody else, you have to have an idea of what something is worth. To your point, almost weekly we'll hear of some family that will call us and say, we sold the family farm for X price, and in our mind we know that they lost $600,000. They made a $600,000 mistake, or an $800,000, or a $300,000. So I think number one, you have to be really objective and you've got to work with them. And the families do have to do their homework. I mean, that is really important. We give a lot of free advice to folks that don't ever hire us. They sell it to their nephew because they need some idea of what it's worth. So that's the starting place, is really starting there.
Glen is correct. Our biggest concern, whether we're hired or not, is when people are considering selling the family farm, is if they don't consult with a professional. That's what really, really concerns us. Because believe it or not, Don, for a lot of people, it's hard to believe, they don't know what the farm is worth. And as Glen said, those are the stories that we hear and we feel bad about for those sellers. And so probably our best advice is for people that own farmland is to find a professional, consult with a professional, even if you keep that farm, but make sure you know what that family farm is worth.
Kristine, do you have professionals? Are you professional to find a way to assess not what the tax assessor would do or what an appraiser would do, but the professionals you're pointing at? Do you have help in making sure that the number that they get is the actual number of the value of the property?
We barely, if at all, look at tax value. But what we need to do, and it's something we're proud of as practitioners, specialists in the business, we need to look at all the farm factors. We need to look at the drainage, the water management of that farm. It can be highly consequential to the value of the farm. There's something called Crop Production Index. You probably have heard of it many times. It's the soil quality of a farm. The location, what county, what area is that farm located in, what producers are in that area, the sizeability, or I should say the farmability, the size of the farm. With tomorrow's equipment, you know, how well can that farm be farmed? And so truthfully, and we wrote an article on this once, there's about 20 plus factors that go into our range of value.
And here's an example. Let's say the Shelby farm is in Renville County, and Don Shelby calls us and says, look at our farm. And now with Google Earth and imaging and the soil mapping and the technology, we can zoom in right away. We can know the soils. We can know, is there a big slough in the middle of it? We can know the strength of your neighbors, because if all of your neighbors are huge farmers, automatically your farm is worth more. Is it next to a tar road or a gravel road? How close is the elevator to it? Is there a drainage outlet for tile? Is there a ditch right there? All of those things. And getting to your question, you know, some families, they don't look at any of it. They say, oh, the neighbor gave us an offer for $7,000 and we took it because that's a lot of money. But they had no idea that the farm was worth $14,000. None. Zero idea, you know. And it's hard to believe that, you know, somebody would make that consequential of a financial decision without looking at it. But the truth of it is, it happens every week.
Warren Buffett, a smart man, probably watched the Discovery Channel because gold is being discovered all the time. New farmland is not being discovered all the time. It's a finite thing. And so he was a wise man, is demonstrated as a wise man. But I want to ask you why so many farms are going to the auction as opposed to just straight private sales, real estate. Because you drive down the road and you see for sale signs on houses, and that's handled by realtors and things like that. So why do you think there are more auctions for farms than auctions for houses, for instance?
Here's the main reason. Number one, a farm is, on average, is only sold once every 50 years. So if you live here, the neighboring farm, you'll likely never have the chance to buy it in your life. So the problem becomes, is the farm worth $10,000 an acre, $11,000, $12,000, or $14,000? And the auction process is the best tool to establish the price. In the last 2 months, we've sold close to 2,000 acres in the last 2 months. Almost every single sale brought significantly more than the family was expecting or hoping. And we had an idea of what they would sell for, but you really don't know until you let two neighbors or the neighbors and the public or investors compete. Because if Don Shelby owns a farm here and you have 3 daughters and your daughters wanted to be farmers and they wanted to expand and the neighboring farm comes for sale, if you don't buy it and if they don't buy it in their lifetime, they may not have a chance to buy it. So then all of a sudden people are willing to spend a high price because it's such a hard thing to buy. You know, on any given day you can drive down a street in Edina, Eden Prairie, and you can buy a house. But in some townships, a farm isn't for sale for 15 years or 10 years. And so that's why the auction process is so key.
And you're filling a necessary niche in that entire process. And it's my personal opinion, if you'll forgive me, that if I were doing a farm sale, if I were in that position, you're my first call for help. I'm going to the Fladeboes. But that's based on years of experience of knowing you. And I hope through this process that people here are going to understand by seeing and hearing you talk, these are people I trust.
Well, thank you. I mean, we are farm kids, number one. That was the main thing. So we grew up in the business. I think the public has appreciated, I've appreciated diversity. I appreciate that my sister is a female, that it's a brother or sister, that we approach this from a legacy standpoint for the families. But we've also been at it a long time. We've been doing this for 20 some years, and we've sold thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of acres of land, and experience does help.
I would just like to ask you that when people say, I do want to sell the farm, I don't want to sell the farm, what motivation is behind the decision you provide to them, your analysis? Is it the love of the farm, or is it the love of the reward that they get from selling the farm?
First of all, nobody can hold on to real estate forever. Not Kristine and I, not even a Don Shelby can hold on to it forever. And people know that at some point it's not sustainable for our kids and then our grandkids to own a piece of farmland with 25 beneficiaries. So I think most people are aware that it is going to be sold. The other issue, though, that is a big deal right now, interest rates are a double-edged sword. Yes, they're creating some challenges for people that wanting to finance these purchases, but for the family, the 65-year-olds just sold a farm in Chippewa County, 3 siblings that own it. One is a science teacher in Mankato. He said, Glenn, I can retire 2 years early because of this farm, because of interest rates. He can put the money in a treasury bond or a CD and get a 5% return, and he doesn't have to go and teach. He loved teaching, but he wants to see his grandkids. So I think the answer is a complex answer, but that's the truth. I mean, we can't hold on to it forever. When it does need to be sold, you want to sell when it's high, and you also want a place to put the funds where there's a return on investment. And that is a main reason why we're busy right now, is because you can put the funds in different places, and people are saying, oh, this is a nice thing. Grandpa's farm is going to pay dividends for the next 20 years.
The point I was getting at, Glenn, is to be able to say, when the child graduates from the University of Minnesota or Yale or Princeton, and the child says, thank you, Mom and Dad, and they say, thank your grandfather.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank your grandfather.
Maybe it's giving to nonprofits, sending their kids to college, as we've talked about, and I think to honor the legacy of the family, honor the legacy of the parents, honor the legacy of the grandparents, that oftentimes is what's most important. Believe it or not, they deserve a bold price, and that's our goal, is to bring them the highest return possible. But most people feel best if the legacy is honored, as well as the highest return possible. If we can give that family a compassionate process and hear them well, tell the story well, and really honor the legacy of that farm, honor the legacy of the parents, the grandparents, maybe the great-grandparents. It's not uncommon that Glenn and I will sell a farm that's been in the family 150 years.
Well, and Don, if you look at the history of historic moments for us, we could tell you 50 stories or 100 stories of standing next to some cafe in Redwood Falls, Minnesota. And we just sold their farm, and the family walks out and they'll stop and they'll say, let's say one prayer for Grandpa. Let's do it right now and thank him. I mean, like, we could write a book on those stories of just that moment where somebody said, God, Mom and Dad worked so hard. There was never money. They were paying off this farm, but we're just so thankful. And so the legacy does live on in a different way, and most families are very honoring of their past, of people that worked hard for that.
Thank you very much, both of you, for reinforcing what I already know of you. And I am so happy to have been invited by you to talk about the Fladeboe family, and I hope people who are watching this get the sense of what I know of you. Your honesty and your big hearts and the service you provide. And I want to thank you very much.